So welcome to the Mediators Roundtable. And we're going to be having a kind of an informal discussion during which I want to address some of the questions that I hear most often and see if I can explain and give answers to like the misconceptions that I hear. I mean, there's so many times people are throwing things at me that are just so unknowing. I'm not criticizing. It's just like the reality. Like people will say, "Is this couples therapy?" I'm like, no, it's not couples therapy. These people are most definitely getting divorced, right? Um, and I get questions like, "Well, is it meditation?" Well, no, it's not. It's not meditation. I think meditation is important, but this is divorce mediation. That's what we're talking about.
So the first question is, what exactly mediation?
Exactly. Like that is the question. What is mediation? And that's kind of woven into every weird question that I ever get. And I think, after doing this work for a bit, what became clear to me was just that mediation is just a process. It's just a different process that we use to get the necessary documentation in place to complete a divorce, right? So, the most common sort of paradigm that I feel that people are operating from is that they feel like I have to have a lawyer, and the other partner has to have a lawyer. He or she has to have a lawyer too, right? And interestingly, that's not exactly the case. We hear a lot about those kinds of divorces because they're contentious. And the people that have a lawyer each, right? Like each partner has a lawyer. Those are the ones where they're really fighting about stuff, which as a mediator, I do not advocate. I mean, it seems to me to be decidedly unhealthy for the couple, unhealthy for their finances, and if there are kids involved, very unhealthy for them too. So those are the ones we hear about, like, two lawyers, and it's dragged out. It costs an incredible amount of money. I mean, in my estimation, it's sort of like the wrong tool for the job, right? Mediation is very different. I want to just clarify something I just said, which is the wrong tool for the job. There are many times where litigation has to be what's used in the instance of domestic violence, child abuse, drug addiction, violent crime. I mean, it's in place for a reason.
That's an important clarification.
Yeah, it's not, mediation is not for everybody. Now, I'm rather optimistic, and I believe in the mediating process. So my personal view is that it's for most people, and there are many people that go through a process of litigating, and by that I mean each partner has an attorney, and it's a process that takes place in that forum, where communication very often is happening from one partner to a lawyer, from that lawyer to the other lawyer, from that person's lawyer to the other partner. You can imagine how that can slow things down. You can imagine how it creates an environment of battle, right? And you're carefully considering a chess move. I want the house. Is that reasonable? And then I talk to my lawyer about it, and the clock is ticking at $400 to $500 an hour, and we're considering that. Maybe there are emails. So it's a slow, battle-like process. And the answer may be no. Don't even go for that. That's crazy. You're not going to get the house, So mediation is a very different process. It's a process in which all of the aspects of the divorce are worked out point by point in a conversational environment, and the decisions are made by the couple. So like that, like right there, that's something that sometimes is like kind of eye-opening for people, particularly if at the beginning of the divorce, I'm saying the beginning of the divorce, the beginning of the unraveling of the relationship, where it's clear, okay, divorce is on the horizon, that we're not going to make it, right? We've tried couples therapy, that's not happening, we are getting divorced. That environment can be like painful, and sometimes the pain is lopsided. One person is really hurting, the other person not so much. Sometimes they're both really hurting. Sometimes neither of them are hurting. Like it's just obvious, like this isn't working out. And we're both aware of that, and we're adults. Are we gonna regress and like start acting in a childlike way and like start like, doing devious things to each other? Or are we going to be more adult? And sometimes the people that are not in a lot of pain, and they're just recognizing that, okay, this marriage it's over, it's not working. Let's, in an intelligent, respectful way, work together and make decisions about every aspect of the divorce. And by that I mean, how will we divide what we shared during marriage? And that's a lot of different things, as you can imagine, right?
So is there some kind of paperwork involved in the mediation process?
Yes, there definitely is paperwork. There's sort of paperwork in two areas. I'll go back to that. So let's say retirement accounts, right? And how much of that retirement account was created when this person was single, right? That needs to be considered. And then the retirement account was contributed to and grew from the time that the couple got married. And so people, and rightly so, will say, well, now hang on a second. I already had X amount of thousands in that thing before we got married, right? So that's a nuance, and that's a point that needs to be, intelligently and respectfully brought out into the open and discussed. Just to go back to that lawyer versus lawyer scenario, you can imagine how that one point, mind you, of many that would have to be worked out in a marriage, just that one point could be something that one person, not fully connecting to the fact that that fund was created before they got married, say something like, that's mine. I started that one. That's my retirement. Well, that's not actually true. It's a fine point of law, but once the couple gets married, now it's a marital asset. And it's true that the contributions that happened up until the point that they got married needs to be considered separately. Right, so that's just an example of the kind of thing that would have to be discussed. In mediation, it's brought out into the open. A mediator, the job of the mediator is to clarify that point and say, okay, now I hear what you're saying. Yes, it is yours, so to speak. It's in your name, but only part of it was created before the marriage. All the other contributions and its growth happened afterward. Right, so we need to consider that point. So there's like an educational aspect to what goes on in mediation. The definition of terms, right? The definition of a question that needs to be answered, a decision that needs to be made, one point at a time, right? So when you're talking about paperwork,
it's a very meticulous process.
It is. It's precise. It's clear. There are no broad sweeps. I had a couple say something like, "Well, we just want a clean break. She gets the house and I get the retirement, and the kids are over there 1 week and they're with us 1 week. Like it's cut and dried." And then like a few weeks later, we're like, "Well, wait, this is not cut and dried at all."
So what exactly happens during the sessions?
Well, so let me rewind a little bit and answer the previous question about paperwork. Right. So for those points to be discussed, to be defined, laid out, like isolated and discussed, like in a point by point way in mediation, there's an awful lot of information that needs to be collected. Right. So I need to know that there's a retirement fund. So we've done the very best we can do in creating forms that are not daunting. There's a basic sort of like fill in the blanks, like box by box. Okay, retirement account, name, when it was created, what it's worth, right, etc. And so it's just like the books like Basketball for Dummies and Knitting for Dummies. This is like divorce forms for dummies, as best as we could do, to collect all of that information. We call that a client information form.
Yeah, so it simplifies the process.
It does.
Saves time.
It does, and the way that I do it is I don't sit there with the couple and say, okay, do you have a retirement account? Okay, and how much is it worth? When was it started? That's not the way that I prefer to collect that information. And it would also mean that the clients would be paying me by the hour to do that.
That's
So we
right.
have a really well-designed set of forms that they fill out on their own. It's absolutely confidential, and their information is private and secure. And then I get that information, and that becomes the material for the discussions that happen in mediation. Right?
Do you involve lawyers at any stage of this mediation process?
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways of incorporating lawyers. Some people come in and for their own sense of protection or security, they want to retain a lawyer, and they're absolutely entitled to do that. The lawyer is not involved in the discussions that we have. That person can speak to their attorney about whatever they choose to, and after we have completed the process, the documentation that we produce can be reviewed by that attorney. Many people feel more comfortable doing that, but then there are many people who realize, not long after starting the process, okay, look, this is an environment of respect, of trust, absolutely confidential. There's nothing that's going to transpire in mediation that would be unlawful or incorrect, right? Look, I have what I call a drafting attorney, who I generally hire, who is the final checkpoint to make sure that every aspect of the agreement that we've arrived at, that the couple has arrived at, the decisions that they've made are reasonable, that they're within the bounds of the law, that they will be accepted by the court as the divorce process moves along, so that there are checks in place, right?
Okay.
So lawyers can be involved in that way, be retained by each party, right? And then there is, of course, my drafting attorney who will review the agreement that we come to.
Okay, this sounds very like a very reasonable and civilized process. So if a couple decides to move along with this process, how do they begin?
It starts with a phone call, really. It's, like I said, so rich in like kind of education in the beginning, with like a little bit of coaching in the beginning. It's a free consultation. I mean, generally people just call me up and say, here is the specifics of my situation.
Okay.
I have a list of questions, like how do I handle this? What about that? And every divorce is different, right? So I'm answering those questions. I'm defining some terms for them. I'm hearing from them the specifics of their situation, right? So that's the first call, and it's one party in the divorce. And usually what it is another call from the other partner.
And both of them are cost free?
Yes. Yeah. It really has to be that way. I mean, for the like human part of it, they need to know what they're getting into, and they may very well have that other paradigm in mind. Like, okay, our mediation sounds good. It sounds more reasonable, but do I have my attorney call you? Or, so they need to have clarified for them what we're going to be doing, what the process is like, how it works, what's expected of them, the timetable, all that stuff. So that's free consultation number one, with usually one partner, and then there's usually a follow. They would have spoken, look, I think we should look into this. It's going to cost less. It's going to take less time. There's a lot less stress. This isn't a fight. This is a collaboration on documentation about decisions that we make about what we shared during marriage and how we will divide it, and then what our life will be like after the divorce. And then the second person will call me. Occasionally you get the couple calling you, like a conference call, basically, like two of them, if they're already very clear about what they're going to do and they're in a cooperative zone. But generally it's one, and that's how it starts, a no-cost consultation. And that's what we really that's what I want to see people do. You know, it gives me a chance to address the specifics of their situation. You know.
Okay, and what would be the final cost for the process?
It varies, you know. I mean, there are couples that may not have children, may not own real estate, are not, they don't have a business together. It can be quite simple, you know. And a simple divorce, you know, can go from $3,000 up to $8,000 or $10,000 if the couple has, you know, multiple retirement accounts, real estate holdings, children of an age where the shared parenting plan needs to be considered very carefully. And then of course there's also the level of cooperation and you know, let's just leave it at that, like the level of cooperation, you know, that the couple functions from, right? So just to paint a picture, so they call up, one of them calls up, okay, this makes sense to me. I don't want to battle. I don't want to sink a ton of money into litigation. I don't need to battle with that person. We're at odds. Our relationship is coming apart, but this seems sensible to me. Okay, I'm going to have my partner speak to you. Then there's that call. At that point, we're setting up a session, right? And we're getting them in for a session and giving them an opportunity first to experience, you know, what that environment is like, where I mean, it might be something, some sort of simple aspect of what has to happen, like, you know, Easter's coming up. What are we going to do about the kids for Easter? And I ask questions. I don't tell them what to do, right? That's not what this is about. This is about me facilitating a respectful, cooperative discussion in which they will make the decisions about their own lives, right? So the holiday comes up. Well, what are we going to do about the kids? And I'll ask them questions like, well, what did you do last year? Where are the kids used to spending Easter? Is there a tradition, right? So, and that's the nature of mediation. So that's how it starts. No cost consultation. If it seems like a fit, it's making sense to them, it feels like it's going to be a good fit for how they're going to dissolve this marriage, then we have a session and we get together and we start to explore that. So generally, you know, you get into that first session. At that stage, people have a clear idea of what this is. This is not set up to be a fight. This is set up as like a round table, right? Like it's an area where people are coming with their desires, their designs for how they would like things to go, their wishes, their considerations of the kind of life that they would like their children to have, right?
Well, it all sounds like a no-brainer to me. I would definitely choose this route to deal with this difficult situation in life.
I agree with you absolutely, and it's my sense that for many people, it is the right way for them to go. You know, I'll be honest. You know, it's what I call an emotional front load. Right? There's a big task that has to happen. We need to make a lot of decisions. We need to document those decisions. It needs to be put into the right form to be submitted to the courts to complete the divorce, right? And, you know, let's be honest, at the beginning of the dissolution of a relationship, there's quite likely going to be some pain, right? Some regret, some sadness, maybe a lot of both of those things. So it's like anything else that you face in life. At the beginning of it, it can seem like, oh God, you know, this is going to be tough. This hurts, right? This is hard. It's really painful to get into serious litigation too. And we've all had friends.
And very costly.
Very costly. We've had friends and family members, and we've watched this sort of ugly thing unfold. And what I communicate to people is like, you know, that's pretty painful too. You know, this is a different sort of pain, and it's like suddenly you're right up against it, you know, and you're maybe in a room with this person that you're being divorced from, you know. Although I will say, with the advent of Zoom and its incredible popularity, that's been an interesting factor, you know, being able to have that conversation where one person might be, you know, at their job and like just the office closed and they're the business closed and they're staying in their
That's
office.
very convenient.
Yeah, it like kind of frees people up because they don't have to drive to the same location, which is how it was done for years and years and years. It was at an office, you know. But Zoom is like a very different kind of new thing for mediation, and it's really it's got a purpose, right? So they sign on from wherever they are, and we begin this process, you know.
Okay.
So
thank you, Nicholas. Thank you for all these clarifications.
yeah,
Thank
well,
you. That was
there's more to it. There's an understanding of what the fruit of mediation is, and that's a very important thing that I have to communicate to people, which is that yes, we can get together in this non-combative environment, and I endeavor to create a discussion, solution-oriented, future-focused way of looking at these things point by point, bite-sized chunks. I am in the meantime notating those decisions. And so their work is the paperwork, the client information forms that I mentioned, and I get all of their information. But then my work is to create this document, which is called a memorandum. And it's that's a like kind of a legal term, but really what it is just me notating each decision that they make point by point. All right, that's the fruit of mediation. And then earlier when you were talking about lawyers, that document is turned over to an attorney, right? So and a lawyer, as a member of the bar, they are the people who can draft a separation agreement. That's the legal instrument that gets submitted to the courts and absolutely necessary to have a divorce brought to completion. Right? So those are the steps, right? So it's a question of content and context. The content is all the specifics of their life that I collect in a client information form. The context is not a battle, it's a discussion. It can sting a little in the beginning, even with Zoom, and people are signing in from other locations, that helps, right? Yes. But there's this emotional front load, you know, there's this discomfort of like, okay, well, I'm really into this. Now, yeah, that's really coming home to me. We're getting divorced. What is that gonna look like? But, you know, having a little faith in the process that your mediator is gonna control and steer, is a really important component, because nobody wants to be in a context, right?
I agree.
Discussing the content of what was a life that they endeavored to create together, in it where it's a fight. You know, people do come to the table with like, I really want this, or I deserve the house, or whatever it is, and that's okay. That's authentic to them. That's what they bring to the table. The context is one of respect, dignity, a reasonable understanding of why they feel that, and then we discuss it.
It all sounds very reasonable, and there is hope that more couples who are deciding to move along with their lives separately, their separate ways, they will choose mediation process. Thank you, Nicholas.
I hope so too, and I think you're right.